Hi, it's Jonathan, and welcome to another video. Today I'll be taking another look at my results on AncestryDNA. You may remember how almost a year ago, I took a DNA test on AncestryDNA to see where my ancestors came from. Well, since then, results have been gradually updated to take newly found data into account. Speaking of newly found data, back in January, my Aunt Kathleen emailed me saying that she did some research into my Eastern European roots. From there, I learned that some of my mom's grandparents came from a town called Gomel, a city within a country called Belarus. This accounts for my Eastern European roots. In this video, I'll take a look into my updated AncestryDNA results. Now, let's begin with this video. Hello! I'm over here by the computer, and here's my AncestryDNA webpage. Discover your DNA story. I will. See which ethnicities each parent passed down to you. With our new ethnicity inheritance feature, we can now separate your regions into the two sides of your family they came from, without testing your parents. A nifty feature. We've also updated your ethnicity estimate. This is what I've mentioned before. We've advanced our DNA science to bring you ethnicity inheritance. Those improvements also make your ethnicity estimate more precise, so you may see changes in your results. We've added new communities. Explore the journeys of your ancestors. I'll do that a little bit later. For now, your DNA looks most like DNA from these 10 world regions. 37% of me are from the Jewish peoples of Europe, which I've mentioned before. You and all the members of this community are linked through shared ancestors. You probably have family who lived in this area for years, and maybe still do. For more specific places within this region where your family was likely from. As I've mentioned before, my Aunt Kathleen figured out that my ancestors are from the town of Homel. Here it is, in what is now Belarus. Though up until, little less than 100 years ago, it was part of Russia. Then again, so is the rest of Belarus. So that much is confirmed. Back to ethnicity estimate. My second largest amount of DNA is Ireland. 26% of my DNA is from Ireland. It's also found in the Channel Islands, France, Iceland, Isle of Man, Northern Ireland, because obviously, and Scotland. Our island population region is centered on this small island, famed for its emerald green landscape, vibrant Celtic culture, and deep-rooted spirit and hospitality. The region's Celtic heritage is notable in its culture, landscape, and the lyrical dialects of the Irish language spoken here. The island boasts a rich sporting culture, Gaelic football, hurling, rugby, and football, and is famous for its literary prowess as well, with names like Swift, Joyce, Yeats, O'Brien, and Rooney. After centuries of emigration, most notably during the Irish famine, 1845 to 1849, this island is the original home of an Irish diaspora that is estimated at over 100 million members. I didn't know the Irish diaspora consists of 100 million members. Thanks for the information. Continuing along the theme of the British Isles is England and northwestern Europe, which apparently also includes the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and the French part of Switzerland. but I know for certain it's England. 17% of my DNA. The history of Britain, the heart of our England and Northwestern Europe region, is often presented as one group of invaders after another displacing the native population. The Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and Normans all left their mark on Britain both politically and culturally. However, the story of Britain is far more complex. In fact, modern studies suggest the earliest populations weren't wiped out, but adapted and absorbed the new arrivals. Interesting. After that is Scotland, which is on the same island. 13% of my DNA comes from Scotland. Fitting better. I'd be English, Scottish, and Irish. With its centre in the northern third of the island of Great Britain, but stretching down to Brittany in France, our Scotland ethnicity region is known for its geographical beauty, medieval architecture, and folklore. Gaelic and Scots have influenced regional English dialects and are both still spoken in some areas. National symbols, including the lion rampant, plantartans, and bagpipes, are often recognized internationally alongside symbols of traditional cuisine like whiskey and hatches. And of course, Wales. England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. I'm quite an all-British person, ethnically speaking. 3% of my DNA comes from Wales. The rolling hills and steep cliffs bounded by England to the east and 870 miles of coastline on the north, west, and south make up our Wales population region, or Cymru in Welsh, which is still spoken there. First settled by Celtic tribes, the country's ancient and medieval history has been preserved and woven into a modern sense of Welsh identity and pride, which is still visible in the country's 600 castles, its Welsh language media, and its Eisteddfodau festivals that celebrate Wales's long tradition of literature, poetry, and music. That's it for the British part of the world. Now, 1% of my DNA comes from the Levant, which makes perfect sense since 37% of my DNA comes from the Jewish peoples of Europe, and the Jews are themselves from the Levant. Primarily located in Israel/Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syrian Arab Republic. Well, of course, since I am 37% Jewish, it's most likely Israel. Our Levant region radiates outward from Lebanon to include Syria, Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian territories along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Home to the ancient city of Petra and the Phoenician port city of Byblos, the region's maritime position made it an important center of trade throughout antiquity. Today it remains a cultural crossroads, where Arabic, Hebrew, French, and English are widely spoken and elements of European, Arab, and Mediterranean cultures merge. The region shares the values of family and kinship, and cuisine that includes olives, grilled meat, and sweets baked with pistachios, almonds, or honey. This section is quite informative. Next is Sweden and Denmark. Sweden and Denmark? Didn't know that. Our Sweden and Denmark region emerged from glacial ice as lands of lakes and islands, mountains and plains. Though the countries are often at war, the people share a common Norse heritage that includes elements of language, religion, and art, though they eventually developed cultures of their own. Situated along the western boundary of the Baltic Sea, relative geographic isolation did not stop the Swedes and the Danes from influencing culture, trade, and politics in Europe and around the globe. Around 1% of my DNA comes from Sweden and Denmark. I remember the last one, my previous test results said that I'm 4% Norwegian. Turns out I'm not Norwegian, but I am Swedish and or Danish. After that is the Baltics, primarily Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. 1% of my DNA comes from that region, just as I have suspected. Thousands of years ago, the early ancestors of the peoples in our Baltics region came from the east and south. They entered a landscape of low-lying plains, thousands of lakes, and millions of acres of forest, a beautiful boundary zone straddling eastern and western Europe. Inhabitants have seen Vikings, crusading Teutonic knights, empires, and communism come and go, but they have maintained an attachment to land, culture, and freedom. I like that paragraph. Next is, this one actually makes perfect sense. Turns out I have roots from Italy after all. 1% of my DNA comes from northern Italy, hence why my last name is Lombardy, which is the name of a region in, well, northern Italy. From the Alps down to Tuscany, the population of our North Italy region lives among the mountains, lakes, and vineyards that are some of the country's most recognized features. Ancient Etruscans preceded the Roman Empire, which was followed by a patchwork of governments and city-states before modern-day Italy was unified in the late 19th century. Today, northern Italy is known for its wealthy urban centers and as the historical birthplace of the European Renaissance. The region's art, architecture, science, and scholarship have been celebrated around the world. And lastly, something I didn't even know until the updated results came in. Less than 1% of my DNA comes from Cyprus. Cyprus? Huh? Our Cyprus population region is centered on an eastern Mediterranean island where rocky mountains, elevated plains slope into fertile vineyards, citrus orchards, and sandy beaches. The Phoenician, Persian, Egyptian, Roman, and Byzantine empires have each claimed the island. Today, however, after British occupation in the late 19th century and a bloody military conflict in the 1970s and 1980s, the island is politically divided between Turkish Cyprus in the north and Greek Cyprus in the south. On both sides, the people of Cyprus, known as Cypriots, have excelled at preserving traditional rural life while also building strong small-scale industries and an excellent education system. I didn't know the education system or the industries were excellent and strong in Cyprus. Hello, Dad. I was just taking a look at my DNA. Did you know that less than 1% of my DNA comes from Cyprus of all places?
Cyprus? In Greece? Well, near Greece?
Yeah, a little near Greece, a little near Turkey.
I know that.
Yeah. Where did this come from? Interesting that I have roots in all over Europe. Just look at this. From all over the British Isles, actually all four corners of the British Isles, Sweden and Denmark, Belarus, northern Italy, and even Cyprus. Oh, and of course, because those Belarusians are Jews, my ancestors at least. And I have the obligatory 1% Levant part of my DNA. This has been quite an interesting trip into my ancestry. You know, all 1,500 reads. Think that's everything accounted for. Ethnicity inheritance. Shall we?
Yes.
Ethnicity inheritance. New. Your regions inherited from each parent. Your parents each contributed half of your DNA. Now you can see which ethnicities you inherited from each parent, even if they haven't taken tests. View breakdown. Parent 1 and 2. Who is parent 1 and 2?
Well, they don't know that probably, but you might be able to figure it out from the results.
Ah. Detailed compare. Oh, take a look at this. Both my parents had roots among the Jewish peoples of Europe. Just one of my parents had roots in Ireland. Hey, Dad, don't you have roots in Ireland?
Oh, for sure.
So parent 1 is you, Dad,
I
and
think
parent
so.
2 is Mom.
Ah,
England and Northwestern Europe is from my mother's side. Scotland is from both my mom and my dad in almost equal numbers. Wales is from my mom's side. The Levant is from Dad's side. Well, at least mostly Dad's side. Since both my parents have Jewish roots, they technically both have Levantine roots, but more so you, Dad. My mother's side is from Sweden and Denmark. The Baltics are also from my mother's side. Northern Italy is from my dad's side, hence why I am Lombardy. And Cyprus?
Lombardia is the capital of Milan.
Ah, that would explain my name. It doesn't show us where my Cypriot side came from. Maybe this will help. This does not help. But at least I get to know a bit more about where each of my parents had their roots from. Your results, Dad? You're 15% Jewish peoples of Europe, 26% Irish, 7% Scottish, 1% Levantine, and of course 1% Northern Italy. Well, my mom, 22% Jewish peoples of Europe, 17% England, 6% Scottish, 3% Wales, 1% Swedish and or Danish, and 1% Baltic. And of course we've gone over my results already. But most of my questions have been answered. I have roots in Belarus. Both my parents have roots from all over England. Actually, my mother has roots in England. It's both my parents that have roots from all over the British Isles. I have roots in the Baltics and in Sweden and Denmark. And somehow I have just barely roots in Cyprus. I am wondering where that came from. Maybe a bit more research is in order. For now, I'm satisfied with my results. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on it. If you enjoyed this entire channel, subscribe to it. And if you want to know when my next video will be coming out, click the bell button after you subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.